episode of Look Past Limits. Today is day 13 of the van build.
And today is going to be
Heater day.
Installing the Chinese diesel heater. So if you've been looking into installing a heater in your van, you will know that there's a lot of information already out there, and we call it a Chinese diesel heater. The one that we've actually bought is by the brand Vevor. It's one of the most common ones on Amazon at the moment, but it seems like apart from the branded ones, the German ones like the Eberspacher and Webasto and things, all of the other ones are being called Chinese diesel heater. They're all pretty much the same. Doesn't really matter what brand they've got on them. Lots of the sellers on Amazon are branding them, but they all seem to be the same thing. And there's other places other than Amazon that you can buy them as well. It doesn't really matter where you buy it from. They all seem to be the same kit roughly. There's a few things that we'll talk about later that differ depending on what kit you buy. And the main thing to choose from is the size. So there's a 2 kilowatt, a 5 kilowatt and sometimes an 8 kilowatt. It's often recommended that for a small van or a van this size, especially if it's insulated, that the 2 kilowatt is good enough. We've opted to go with the 5 kilowatt. The thinking behind that is that it's not using that much more power, it's not using that much more fuel. It is slightly bigger, but if you take your van to the Alps in the winter, you would rather have a little bit too much heat rather than not enough heat. You can always crack a window or something if you've got too much. And another point that a lot of people make is that it's thought that the inside of these, between the 2 kilowatt and the 5 kilowatt, is the exact same thing, just in a different amount. So who knows, I wouldn't get too bothered about choosing between the 2 or the 5, just get whatever one you can get at a good price. The prices seem to fluctuate quite a bit on Amazon as well, and the other websites. So we've just unboxed this one that we've bought just now, and I'll talk you through the different pieces here, and then we'll start having a look at where we're going to put it in the van and install it. So as I say, the brand that we've bought is Vevor, but they are all much the same, and the colours changes with them, but it doesn't really matter. So this is how it looks. This is the cold air intake on this side. This will be where the hot air blows out. This is the attachment for the multi-plug for the wiring harness, and on the bottom here where it goes through the floor we've got a rubber gasket, and we've got an exhaust and an intake for cold air in and hot air out, and we've also got a fuel line here as well, and we've got 4 bolts to be able to bolt it through the floor of the van. So this is the base plate that you can attach to the bottom to attach it to the floor of the van. You can also buy an upgraded base plate. We haven't bought it, so we'll just work around it, but you can buy a better one, and we'll put the link to that in the description as well on Amazon, which has this but also has a round circle here that drops all the way through the floor, the thickness of the floor of the van, but we'll get away with using this. This is all the ducting for the hot air side. This will all be inside the van. And then this is a ducting for the cold air intake and the exhaust out, which will go on the outside of the van from these points here. This will go on the end of the cold air intake, and that will go on the end of the exhaust pipe, and that's just some fittings to attach the exhaust to the underside of the van. Here we've got the fuel tank. Depending on what unit you buy, some of them come with this, which is a pipe that you can drop in from the top, which sucks the fuel up, and you can cut this to whatever length you want so that this pipe can stop close to the bottom of the fuel tank, and it means that you don't suck any of the debris at the bottom of the tank. The other option is to drill a hole here or here and just put your fuel pipe straight into there, but the problem that some people experience is that the fuel pump ends up sucking little bits of debris from the bottom of the tank. This tank is the standard ones that comes with all of these units. If it doesn't fit your space, you can buy different shaped ones as well, or you can of course link it to the main diesel tank on the van. On a lot of vans it's a bit of a problem because you have to actually drop the diesel tank from underneath to get to the sender unit to put your feed in. For us, we're just going to put the diesel tank at the back here. It'll be the easiest option. This is the fuel line. And we've got the thin plastic stuff. Again, this varies a lot depending on what kit you buy, and because we've got the thin plastic stuff, we have to cut some sections of this and use these Jubilee clips to join it at all the different sections. The Jubilee clips are for the fuel, and the bigger ones here are for these. These huge ones are for the ducting. Here we've got the fuel pump. This is the fuel filter. This will attach the fuel pump. These will attach these on the underside of the van. We've got some nuts and bolts to secure the heater down onto the floor, some zip ties. This is the display unit, which will mount beside our electrics up on the side of the kitchen there. And there's also a small remote control that you can use if you're too lazy to reach from the bed to press the unit. And then here is the wiring harness. So on the wiring harness we've got a positive and negative that go to the battery. It's already got an inline fuse. We'll probably actually chop this off and wire it to our fuse box, and we'll put the negative straight back to the negative bus bar. The cable, it's a great setup that it comes with the whole wiring harness together, and it's got the plugs on it. One plug goes to the heater, one plug goes to the fuel pump, and one plug goes to the display unit. The only downside with it is that, being Chinese and being made cheaply, it's really low gauge wire, it's really thin. And if we wanted to use this amount of cable that came with it, we would definitely be upping it to a thicker, heavier wire. We think that we're going to be able to mount the heater pretty close to where our fuse box and battery is going to be, so we might get away with using this wire. If you're mounting it really close, then you can probably get away with this, but if you're going to have your battery at one end of the van and your heater at the other end of the van, I would look at upgrading this to a heavier gauge wire. The problem is that the longer the wire, the more voltage drop you can get, and the more voltage drop you do get means less power for the startup. It will run fine, but when it tries to fire up, the glow plug won't heat properly. So, but we think we'll get away with this. We think that we'll get away with using pretty much all of the stuff that came with the kit. A lot of people upgrade a lot of the parts, but we're going to see how it goes like this. And of course you get some instructions, but it's just a badly translated Chinese manual, so it doesn't really help very much. So, but we should say that this video is not an instruction manual either. It's not a how-to guide. You're only watching this for entertainment purposes, of course. So step one is deciding where the heater's going to be. I've just been lying down here measuring on the underside of the van, and Vendy's inside here measuring here. So we've decided to put it along here somewhere, and we're just trying to find a good spot where we've got plenty of clearance on the underside of the van for the exhaust and the inlet to go through. So Vendy thinks she's found her spot there, and she's using some pieces that we'll be using for building the bed later to see where the vent's going to come out, and she's just shouting measurements to me, and I'm down here having a look underneath, and we think that the exhaust and inlet will come about here, which is looking good. So we think we've found our spot where we want it to be, and we now just drill out the holes for these to go through the van. So we now have the holes drilled where the base plate will go. This hole's for the exhaust, this hole's for the inlet, and these extra cutouts are for the wire to the fuel pump and the fuel pipe. And the reason that this is bigger will become apparent shortly when we bolt the heater to here, and then it will sit in here.
It's a bit of a crazy day to be putting a diesel heater in. We're both sweating, it's lovely sunshine, so last thing you would be thinking about is installing your diesel heater, but it will become handy in the winter. Steve even had to put his shorts on because he's too hot. Maybe summer's finally arriving. So the next step is to connect this to the heater. We've put the base plate on, and we've put the cable through for the fuel pump, and we're now going to put the exhaust and the inlet on and bolted this down here.
and then we'll seal up that hole and drop all of this through. So now Vendy's got the messy job of putting the fireproof gasket sealant on. What we're doing here is, because we've drilled the big hole in the floor and we've got the linoleum, then the thickness of the wooden floor, then the polystyrene insulation, and then the metal floor, we're sealing all of that up all round the edge here, that it's fully sealed as one with this fireproof gasket sealant, and we're also putting it all over the linoleum where the base plate will be. So once that's all covered, we can then drop the heater in there and it will be fully sealed. If there was to be, there shouldn't be obviously, but if there was to be at any point any leak from the exhaust from anywhere around here, it wouldn't be able to get up past here and back into the van, it would go out the way. So we've dropped the heater into position and you can see some of the fireproof gasket leaking out the side there, and we've just bolted it down into the floor on all four corners, and now the rest of the work for a while is all going to be underneath the van. So we're thinking that we're going to position the fuel tank here, but between here and the heater we're going to have the wire for the fuel pump and the fuel pipe all running underneath the van so that we don't see any of it here in the van. So underneath here is where everything's coming out, and we want to attach all of that into position and then run the pipe and the cable back towards the fuel tank.
So a lot of the heater install is actually happening underneath the van. So while Steve is down there trying to work out where all the attachments and exhausts are gonna be, I'm gonna try and insulate this last door. So we still never done the sliding door, so I've got the wool organic insulation and I'm gonna stuff that in and trying to close that off. Another little job of the list.
So I'll try and show you what I've got done underneath the van here before we move to the back. So this is obviously where it comes down from the heater. We've got the exhaust and we've done that round to here with the little muffler attached with a bracket onto the side here. It's kind of tight and dark under here, so I hope you can see all of this. We need to make sure that there's a constant downhill on the exhaust pipe, because there is water, and if it pulls at any point then it would rust. So that's like a constant down all the way and out there, and then we have this pointing out of the van here. For the intake we've attached this here with the Jubilee clip, cable tied onto here. This is solid and this goes along and in here, and we've also got the fuel line and the wire for the fuel pump coming out, so they both come out here. What we didn't probably video earlier, and I forgot to say, is obviously these holes that we cut out of the van, we filed them all, we made them smooth, and then we put a little bit of paint around the edge so that any of exposed metal's not going to get rust. It's probably not going to get there anyway because of the amount of sealant that we've got on here anyway, but just to be on the safe side, and because the wires and the fuel pipe's running through there. And then so along here we've got the fuel pump. The wire goes into the plug on the top of the fuel pump here. We cut these little sections and connected it on here to the fuel pipe going in there, and then the fuel pipe on this side runs here, and I've got it running in this conduit to protect it, and it just follows another conduit that was already on the bottom of the van going all the way back there. And then I'm going to move along to that side now and start doing the fuel tank. Also, if we come back here, the fuel pump, if you can see that, is mounted at an angle of about 30 degrees up towards the heater. It should be this way to be pumping up the way. If there's any air, then the air can get out. So it's a bit of a task doing all this just because it's such a tight space down here. But that's it done, and we'll move to the back now. So we now just need to put the nipple into the fuel tank so that we can connect the fuel line to the bottom of it. What we've done is we've drilled a hole in the bottom here, we've put a piece of string in there, we've attached it onto the nipple, and the idea is if we pull that, it should pop out of here. So we got the fuel tank secured in place here. We've just made a bracket in the back there and screwed it through, and it's bolted onto the metal of the van on that side, and then we've got this aluminium trim on this side, and it's solid. So that'll be fine there, and then I'll show you underneath what we've done as well. So hopefully you can see this alright, but underneath here, that's the hose there, the fuel pipe coming down through the van. Again, we drilled the hole, filed it, painted it, put some sealant round it, and then put some more sealant round the conduit here. So the hose is inside there, comes round and goes through the fuel filter. I've just connected it all with cable ties because it's easy, and you probably need access to this fuel filter at some point to clean it out, so we can just cut the cable ties and get access to it. And then the fuel line goes in the conduit all the way along there to where you saw earlier. And so inside, back at the heater, we're still looking like this. We won't be able to do the ducting here until we build the bed, so in a few more episodes we'll be building the bed, which will come along here, and we'll put that small piece of ducting on there. And in tomorrow's episode we're going to be doing the electrics, so we'll leave this for now, and tomorrow we'll be connecting up this. So that's it for today, guys. We hope you enjoyed watching the heater install. Hopefully you learned something from that. If you want to know any more about it, just leave a question in the comments below and we'll try and get back to everyone. And thanks very much again for watching. You know the script. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, subscribe. We'll have another video coming out tomorrow with electrics and a few more videos, and we shouldn't be very far from being done now, so we might even manage to get this build done in less than 30 days. So, thanks again guys. Cheers.